Hi everyone, Michael Rubenfeld here. How are you? I had a friend recently tell me that they believed that if a war broke out in Poland, if Poland was under attack, they believed that the unquestionable response that both they and I should have would be to fight, to defend Poland. Now, this friend grew up in Poland. They've always been living here, whereas I did not grow up in Poland. I grew up in Canada. And, one of the interesting differences between having grown up in Canada versus, say, a country like Poland is that the relationship to patriotism is very different. So in Canada, a lot of people have moved in order to, I think, get away from extremism and find conservatism in Canada. Canada's a very conservative country. That means that even when there's a conservative government, or what Canadians might think is a kind of more right-wing government, they're still polite. And they're not as aggressive, say, as the sort of Polish politicians here, right, left, all over the place. We don't really have a version of Confederacja. We don't even really have a version of peace. I would say that our conservative government is, like on the right side of platform. The point is that in Canada, our version of patriotism is not wrapped up in the idea of needing to defend Canada or defend Canada's honor or any of those things. We don't grow up hearing stories of how Canada was in danger and people fought for Canada. Of course, we hear stories of Canadians that fought in World War I and in World War II. I, as a Jew whose grandparents were all Holocaust survivors, I grew up hearing stories of the Holocaust quite intensely. But first of all, no one ever expects there to be a war in Canada. It's just not, it's just kind of unthinkable. And as a result, no one really worries that they'll ever have to confront a time where they might be asked to fight to defend Canada's freedom or honor. So it's interesting how in Poland it was just such an unquestioned response that, of course, this friend would fight to defend Poland's honor. And I bet a lot of Polish people feel the same way. And I think that kind of historical relationship to the Polish struggle, the Polish fight, is really like ingrained in what the patriotism looks and feels and smells like in Poland. People are really patriotic here in ways that I don't relate to. I respect. I even admire at times. But although I love Poland, I don't have an intense patriotic relationship to Poland, because that's not a feeling that I've ever grown to understand, or even, I would say, value. I think that intense patriotism can quite easily lead to nationalism. What I like about Canada is that, unlike America, where it's like America first, in Canada, you are Canadian once you've become a citizen. And, even if you're struggling with the language, or, in some cases have never learned the English language, it's just too difficult, you're you're accepted as a Canadian, you're considered a Canadian, that is, part of the identity of what Canada and Canadians are. Of course, there's going to be a diverse perspective on that, particularly in smaller towns versus larger cities. But if anything, patriotism in Canada exists in Quebec. Quebec, as you may or may not know, it was colonized by the French, whereas the rest of Canada was mostly colonized by the British. And so Quebec has got a completely different culture, completely different, and it's rooted in the French language and also the French colonial systems versus the British colonial systems. So it really feels like you're stepping into another world when you go to Quebec. Montreal, Quebec City, beautiful, amazing cities. They both feel very European, very different than a city like Toronto. There have been on several occasions referendums held by the Quebec government as to whether or not Quebec should separate from the rest of Canada. And it never has. They've always lost. Or I would say the winners of the referendums have been those who have chosen to stay in Canada versus become its own country. I guess kind of like, what happened with Brexit. But man, they don't win by much. Sometimes it's just by a few points. It's pretty close. There are a lot of people in Quebec who are very patriotic, nationalistic about Quebec and the French language. And there are a lot of people like myself who even understands why Quebec might want to separate from the rest of Canada. The desire to preserve a Quebecois culture, which can really sometimes clash with the rest of Canada, the rest of Canada's culture. Anyways, they never have, and a lot of the reason for that is connected to economy. I think you saw what happened in the UK with Brexit, the disaster that is, and there was enough adequate communication to properly educate enough citizens to vote against the referendum. And the last referendum was a long time ago, 20 years ago or more. And it probably will never separate from Canada. But it's interesting that nationalism or patriotism is strongest there, because I think Quebecers often believe that they need to fight to protect and preserve their culture. And of course, that is a defining factor of Poland's history. And so I understand and I respect that. And I love Quebec. It's my favorite part of Canada. I think if I were to ever move back to Canada, I could imagine myself moving to Montreal. I'm not sure what I would do there, which is why I don't live there, or I didn't live there. There's not much of an English language acting scene. But, here I am in Poland, where there's even less, so I'd probably have more success in Quebec as an actor than I do in Poland. But I'm here for different reasons. I think part of my love or my draw to Poland is also rooted in its patriotism, in how patriotic people are, and how much people love Poland, love this country. And I feel like the love is growing even, I think, as we move further and further away from communism. I see a lot of Polish people moving back to Poland. The economy is strengthening. I think overall Poland's in pretty interesting shape right now. But I still wouldn't fight in a war for it. But I wouldn't fight in a war for anyone. I wouldn't fight for Israel either. Because I don't believe in war. I don't believe in war. Now, if someone had kidnapped my family, and I had to fight to protect them or to get them back, then yeah, then I would. My wife and child, absolutely. But beyond that, I can't say that I would. And I don't know how I should feel about that. But I'm curious to know how you feel about that, how you feel about patriotism, nationalism, how you feel about whether or not you would fight to protect Poland if a war broke out, or would you leave? What would you do? Or perhaps the question is, what will you do if or when Putin crosses over into this country? Anyways, I love you. Like and subscribe. And if you want to support me further, I have a Patreon account, and I'd appreciate your support. For 25 zloty a month, you can help me continue to make content like this. Thank you to all of my current Patreon members. I really appreciate you. You can't imagine how valuable your support is to me. So thank you all, and I love you.